welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of the Nonprofit Show. This is going to be a great conversation to have because I think this is a conversation that a lot of nonprofits, their boards, and their leadership are having, and that's how to creatively approach revenue growth with maybe a different strategy for some of us. It's challenging times, and our guest, John Abrahamson, he's the CFO and the COO of Action Council. He is going to talk to us about maybe a new way and a different way to look at this situation. We were chatting in the green room, and it's a lot of opportunity right now for change, isn't it, John?
It is indeed. And good
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah, good morning. Okay, before we get going, I want to make sure that we express our gratitude to our presenting sponsors. They are Bloomerang American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, JMT Consulting, and Intuit QuickBooks. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, and I want to briefly mention that we kicked off a really interesting project here on the Nonprofit Show called the Nonprofit Show Global Edition. One of our co-hosts, Matthew Murray, is based in the UK, and we are doing 1 to 2 episodes a month just about international philanthropy. And so it's very interesting. And so I hope you can join us along for some of those episodes. John Abrahamson, wow, CFO and COO of Action Council. 2 words that are really powerful, action and council. What is it
Indeed.
that you all do?
So we are a community-based organization in the Monterey County, and we support approximately 30 smaller organizations that deliver social services such as healthcare, education, and other services to the local community.
Amazing. So we were chatting also in the green room. Maybe one of the most beautiful places on earth,
Mm.
Monterey County in Northern California. Are you doing fiscal sponsorship with your
Indeed.
organization?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed. Yeah, so the organizations are fiscally sponsored.
Okay. So for those of you who might not know what that means or are maybe somewhat new to that, could you explain how your fiscal sponsorship program works?
Absolutely. So the organization itself is a nonprofit. The smaller organizations either do not have the infrastructure, knowledge base, or the size to be their own nonprofits. So they utilize our nonprofit status to apply for grants, and we manage those grants.
Mhm.
And all of the expenses, their IT, their HR. So for all intents and purposes, we're the infrastructure to allow them to do their mission work within the community.
Mhm. I kind of sometimes feel like, which I love the fiscal sponsorship concept. I feel like for people that don't understand it or haven't really been exposed to it in their community, it's a way to say it's a mix between having a wealthy grandparent and a banker because you have you have an institution that's going to help guide you. They might not be able to fund you, but they can assist you.
Yes.
They're that offer that wisdom and that infrastructure, as you mentioned, to
Yeah.
help with everything from payroll to guidance.
Mhm.
I mean, so much, right?
Indeed. In fact, I think building their knowledge base so that they can at point become their own nonprofit status is one of the things that many aspire to. Some don't, because some are addressing a specific cause for a short period of time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great comment. Is it sometimes it's just a great way to join to get on that path towards growing and being, your own 501c status, whatever that might look like. But sometimes it's just a great umbrella that you march with. Yeah, really
Indeed.
interesting. Well, we are delighted to have you here, and we're really, really interested in your approach, especially with your financial and operational background. So let's jump into it because you're saying something here that we don't always hear from the CFO, C-suite, that earned and contributed revenue is everyone's responsibility.
Indeed.
What does that look like
Indeed.
to you?
So the majority of my experiences in past has come from cultural attractions, and so working with National Geographic Society, building their new museum, as well as Monterey Bay Aquarium, where I spent near a decade there. The What I witnessed was a lot of siloing within the organization, and so the philanthropic work was being done kind of autonomously within a silo, as was the earned revenue and guest services. And so my approach has always been to build out, and this is what we brought to National Geographic Society for their new museum, was a more comprehensive ecosystem that incorporated all of those elements into a strategy, a singular strategy to what I like to say, float all boats.
Mhm. How hard was that? I
Hmm.
mean, people get it, or and because that's a heavy lift.
Yeah, it is. It's depending on the legacy aspect of the organization. So if you have National Geographic, a 138-year-old organization, never had a museum, very specific ways of going about business,
Yeah.
had to switch gears. I found that they were more open to the discussions, primarily because we were building something new, something we'd never done before.
Mhm.
So in the case of, say, Monterey Bay Aquarium, where the legacy was about a 40-year-old organization, things grew kind of organically and in silos. And that was a little more difficult of a discussion, just because, we've always done it this way type of mentality was, obviously not everyone adhered to, but these discussions were had with a lot of transparency, a lot of explaining the why and
Mhm.
what the outcome would be and why we needed to make these type of investments.
John, you just sparked something really interesting in my brain, and that is how much easier it might be for an organization to develop a new philosophy or behavior
Mhm.
when there's something new attached to it.
Indeed.
That's fascinating. I never thought of it that way. In fact, I
Mm,
might have thought, oh, when something's new and like a capital campaign or a new building, you got to really hunker down and do things the same way. It's
mhm.
really an interesting way to shift the thought, isn't it?
Well, what it does is it kind of breaks that fire drill
Mhm.
mentality, right? We don't have the time to do something different. We don't have the resources to do something different. But if something is implemented that kind of breaks that cycle, that's the end that you can utilize to have larger discussions.
Wow. Yeah. And that's something as leaders across the nonprofit sector to be aware of that. I'm going to use the word opportunity. It might
Hmm.
be a little uncomfortable because you think you're starting in on one thing, like a capital campaign for a new museum, and then realize, wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of new things going on or bubbling up around us. That's fascinating. That's
Yeah.
something you've given me something new to think about. So let's talk about this a little bit deeper. And you're saying we can do more by doing less.
Mm-hmm.
That starts with prioritizing the mission.
Yeah.
That seems like a hard thing to do when you're jumping in on so many things that you're trying to get done.
Yeah. Uh, again, I'll harken this back to type of the legacy aspect of an organization.
Mhm.
Nonprofits are there for mission, and
Yeah.
so anything that moves the mission a little bit, a lot in between is something that we want to do, right? So it's very hard for us to say no. Unfortunately, what happens is we have a finite amount of resources. And because I come from the side where we generate, I come from rev gen, so revenue generation, whether it's contributed or earned, I know how hard it is to bring those dollars in. So I want to make sure that once they're on the other side, when they're in our bank account, or once those pledges have been made, that we honor those gifts or donations by making the most out of every dollar that comes in.
Mhm.
So what does this look like? From the standpoint of prioritization, it means that we have to do a very rigorous analysis of everything we're doing. And what I mean by doing more with less is that once you've looked at all of the programs that you're currently undertaking, measuring the amount of resource allocation, and we'll talk more about that type of analysis later, but understanding the amount of lift to mission impact is an imperative, because what I believe is that you can actually have higher impact by doing fewer programs that have the most impact towards your mission, your stated mission, than spreading out all your resources amongst a ton of different programs that may have just a little bit of impact. But
Yeah.
you have to be very judicious with the use of your resources. So I believe, cutting out a lot of the smaller programs that are just having a little bit of lift towards mission and funneling those resources to the ones have impact. That's where you focus your attention.
It's really interesting because, I hear echoes of that term mission creep. And I agree. I think that in the nonprofit sector, we're so, especially when we see nonprofits around us falling or failing, it's a lot of times we're like, okay, well, we'll take that on. Okay, well, we'll enter in that. And I find that a lot of times when you talk to members of a nonprofit team, they can't always describe what their mission is.
Right.
They don't have a standard answer a lot of times, like that. It's not even the elevator speech. It's like the phrase. It's the 10 words that this is what we do.
Right.
Do you see that changing? Like, do you see this mission creep aspect becoming more of an issue?
Well, I think it's going to need to be addressed. Absolutely. The times we're in where funding is becoming more challenging, where wallet share for earned revenue side is becoming more challenging. And as we described earlier in our side conversation before we came on, that a lot of the demographics are changing as well. So the landscape is inherently different from what we've experienced in the past. That almost demands a rigorous look at how we've been doing things and how does it apply to where we are currently.
Yeah, and I think that is a very, very wise comment. I also feel like sometimes it's the finance team that sees it first and then pushes leadership, because they are in leadership, to address it. And I know that's like a little bit of a side conversation, but do you ever feel like that with being the type of leadership in the segment that you're in?
So it's interesting. When we get back to siloing, finance can be in a silo as well.
Yeah.
And they can oftentimes look at things from a row column spreadsheet approach and not understand really the true impacts of some of the decisions we make from a financial side of things. So me personally, what I've done is go out and talk to the teams and understand, how their work happens. What is the impact before making any types of final decisions? Because yes, it can make all the sense in the world to, strike one line of on a budget, but you have to understand how that plays out in the field. Now, whether that's, in my current position where it's mostly about social services and community support, or in cultural attraction where it'll have impact, you have to understand the actual impact from your financial decisions before finalizing. And the other half of that is to ensure not only are you bringing people in on that conversation prior to decisions, but you also are able to explain the why these things have to happen prior to.
Yeah. And then, I'm going to call it out, John. I think you have to layer in this fear factor. I think there's a lot of fear with the different departments in finance because most people, it's a different language. They feel a lack of confidence when it comes to numbers or that type of strategic thinking. And then you have the finance team, like you just said, it's very black and white. I love that you said it's a column and row mentality. And then you have these other people that are like from programming that come in and it's so emotional. There's a lot of times there's like that loggerhead and it's tough to get around that, isn't it?
It is indeed. And you touched on something very important. And, the aspect of fear, this really takes a lot of change management. And, I think it's behooving upon the finance department to, bring financial literacy to the organization so that when these tough decisions are made, they have a little better context to which to digest them. So one of the things we did at Monterey Bay Aquarium, I worked with a fabulous CFO, Troy Grande, who was at the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle. He and I went out to all of the various divisions to have a discussion about money in, money out in a very, top line fashion so that they understood a little bit more of the economic makeup of the organization so that when we say we have to do X, they get, okay. And what we hope for is to get to a place where we say, where, the teams are saying, well, I may not like it, but I understand it. And if you can get to that point, then you've done your job.
Yeah, I love that. And good for you because we don't see that enough. We don't see that cross communication,
Yep.
so that everybody is understanding how the other teams are working. Because,
Yeah.
we don't do that. So that's super cool. Well, let's move on to something I can't wait to learn about from you. And that's called the Bubba Gump Effect. Embrace the storm and
Yeah.
survive. What does this mean?
So, but the Forrest Gump was like one of my favorite movies, and there's one sequence where they become very successful as shrimp fishermen, and that happened because a huge hurricane, I guess, hit, and all of the other fishermen had tied their boats to the shores, trying to wait it out, and their ships were destroyed. And so the only ship left standing was the one that had faced the storm head on. Not intentionally, mind you, but that was the end result. So I use this as a metaphor for, rather than trying to batten down the hatches and trying to just wait it out and hoping that things will change, continue to do the same things we've always done.
Yeah.
My feeling is to head first into the storm and utilize it as a challenge and an opportunity, right? So what can we do differently to address this new landscape, as we were discussing earlier? And I firmly believe that you actually have more danger tying your boats to the shore and just trying to wait it out than you do trying to utilize a blue ocean strategy. And for those unfamiliar, this is a fabulous book. I've based a lot of my new programming on this mentality that you don't try to compete in waters that are filled with other competitors. You go to waters where there's nobody at, and you try to think in terms of how you can take an existing business model and think about it differently. Eliminate some of the things. I think Circus du Soleil was their example, and I don't know if we have time to get into that, but the idea being that you rethink the basic business models and think, do we really need to do it this way? Does a circus necessarily have to happen in a tent? Do they have to have food? Do they have to have animals? Circus du Soleil said no, and they were, for a while, very successful doing so.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think that, for those organizations that were challenged by the rapid changes
Mhm.
brought on by the COVID pandemic, I'm sure you saw this in your community. I certainly did. And even with my own business, and that is, you had a choice. It was like, as we say in my family, venga Jesus, come to Jesus moment.
Mhm.
You had to say, are we going to just close up like a clam and
Yeah,
wait it out, or are we going to open up and really, aggressively pursue, might even be a new strategy, but we're going to lean in. And I have been fascinated post pandemic to see the results of those decisions,
indeed, indeed.
because the ones that leaned in, I don't know about what you've seen, John, but it seems to me like they moved through it, they provided more service, they got better
Mhm.
funding, they built resiliency on their teams. It's
Yeah,
been a fascinating thing that we're still playing out, right?
indeed,
You
indeed.
know, yeah, very interesting. Okay, Bubba Gump Effect. I love it. I think that's going to be something I totally borrow. Let's talk about, this is an interesting thing, and I don't know how you're going to go on this. The true
Yeah,
cost versus the plate cost. What does
yeah.
that mean?
Again, utilizing a metaphor. So I used to work, when I was doing corporate, I worked for Cisco Food Services. It's
Ah,
the largest food distributor in North America.
mhm.
And I ran a team, about 21 million. But our job was to be consultants to our chefs. That's how we went to market.
Ah,
Well, the
interesting.
idea was to not sell, but be a resource. And so we would have chef. I personally would have a chef that um, wouldn't understand why he was losing money. He was losing money every single month, and he goes, "John, I'm pricing out appropriately. I spend $8 total on the product that's on this plate. I'm charging 28. Why am I losing money?" And I'm like, "Well, chef, you have to apply all the costs of running
Mhm.
your business and a per plate aspect on top of the food cost to understand whether or not you're pricing out appropriately. That's your main source of income. So the hot water, the breakage, the insurance, the workers' comp, all of these things have to be rolled together in and divided into a per plate cost factor to add to. Now, how does all this play out into nonprofits? You apply it towards your programs. So one of the things that nonprofits love to do are galas, and a lot of times the true cost of those galas are not factored in. All of the costs that go into creating a gala has to be considered to understand whether or not the final tally was worth the lift. As one of my coworkers once said, it was the squeeze worth the juice. And it's really something that, again, you talk of fear, a lot of folks don't want to factor that in because it's, galas are beloved. They're fun. They're, it's a lot of activity. It feels like we're doing a lot. But I'll tell you, I've done true cost on a lot of them, and a lot of them just didn't pencil out in the end, and you could be applying all of those resources to maybe not as sexy a thing, but can definitely get both mission and funding at a higher levels. So these are tough conversations, no doubt. And it takes strong leadership to be able to have them, but also a very communicative, someone who can, leadership that can communicate these in a fashion that makes folks want to come along, that makes them understand. Again, may not like it, but I get it. And so then you'll have their buy-in.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, John, because I think a lot of times what I see is we see organizations that can't even begin to value the stress and the duress on their teams that put these galas together, and that they're just trashed, and that they totally don't focus in on their donors and their existing programs.
Oh my gosh.
For a lot of time leading up to that
Yep.
1 6-hour event that really takes 600 hours, right? I mean, it's such
absolutely
a shocking thing to look at. And so I love that true cost versus play cost. I would also argue, John, that we could take those same principles and apply that to our clients, and not just the programming, but for every person that walks through the door, or every person that we serve, whatever that looks like. What is that cost?
Well, that you touched on such a great point, and that is that what are we not doing so that we can do this? Because as you mentioned, some things are going to fall wayside, and some of those have real high impact. So it takes an unflinching look at how you go about delivering mission, right? And I don't care what that mission is, whether it's inspiring conservation of the ocean, or helping local community members, or whatever your mission is. Keeping that focus. And I think that if we sum up this whole conversation, it's like making all of these very kind of crackers and sand, dry decisions, whether it's financial and otherwise, through the lens of how is this impacting mission, good, bad, or indifferent. And I know we think we are,
right?
But sometimes we're not.
Right. Well, I think to what you said in the very beginning, and it seems to be like a thread of this conversation, you have to kind of divide the emotional versus the intellectual, because it's really hard to separate that emotional aspect. Like, what's the right thing to do? What's our value? What's our mission versus how do we navigate this so we can be sustainable? And I think one of the biggest problems we have in our sector, John, is that we always want to say yes, and it's heartbreaking, but it's real to sometimes say, I have to say no right now. Now, maybe I can say yes to this question down the road, but I can't do it right now. It's really hard because that's not in our nature, in the nonprofit sector.
Well, this is why strong leadership is a necessity, right? One of the greatest gifts I was able to give my teams was the ability to say no. And whether it was to meetings because we were, had too many meetings going, what have you. But I think it's sometimes more compassionate to say no than it is to say yes, and not be able to fully fulfill.
Yeah, I agree. There's one of my new mantras this year has been clarity is kindness. Meaning,
oh my goodness, I love that.
Yeah, but you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
to really drill down, simplify, repeat, and be direct
Mm.
so that everybody can get rid of that garbage in their head about what if, or, where am I going?
Mhm.
But say, you just said it beautifully. I may not like it, but I understand what I have to do.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, and why we need to do it as an
Yeah.
organization. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Okay, I'm going to remember this forever because I think I have been guilty of this issue, that true
Mm.
cost versus the plate cost. I think that's for me today. I'll just witness. That's been really powerful. We don't have a lot of time left, and I really want to get into this because it almost seems like it's bookending our conversation, John. And you advise us that consistency proves intent, and it
Mhm.
starts with culture. Talk to us about this.
Everything that we discussed uh, i- is dependent upon a culture that can support it. And it is, I've seen firsthand how some leadership can destroy a program, team, or organization. And I can see how leadership can rally the troops with minimal resources around an incredible mission. Uh, and what this means from a practical standpoint is that we take the time as leadership to spend time with the teams and understand their daily activities, their challenges, their
Mm,
triumphs, and the point of this particular point of the segment is that it can't just be one off. I've seen more damage done by a leader that will go down with the teams and be integrated in um, their group team meetings, and do that for a month or two or three, and then disappear into their office.
yeah.
And I've read on Glassdoor, because one of the things that I do, side thing, is because I like to understand culture. And
Yeah.
yes, that's a little bit biased because it's people that's left, but you get a tone.
Yeah.
And this is where I've heard from employees that, well, they used to, care. They used to be down with us on the floor. They used to shake my hand and ask how my day was doing. I haven't seen them for 3 months.
Yeah.
And so what I mean by consistency proves intent, that's where trust is built. And
Hmm.
all of culture is based on trust. And if you show up consistently, day after day, week after week, month after month, they say, "Hey, he means it or she means it."
Yeah.
And so from that trust, then you can have tough discussions. Then you can, build a culture that can support all of the things that we need to do as a mission-driven organization.
Hmm. I love that. And when I hear you speaking like that, I also think that it becomes a part of a communication strategy,
Hmm.
right? Like
Indeed.
it may not be verbalized, but you can model behavior. We do that as humans,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So it's really cool to see that. I mean,
Mhm.
going both directions, like how a team responds to the leads, how the leads respond to a team. It's something that we don't talk enough about, isn't it?
Oh, and nothing works without the culture to support.
Yeah.
The type of work that we do. Everyone is incredibly passionate,
Hmm.
but they as we alluded to earlier, a lot of times there's not the full knowledge of the financial or the
Hmm.
logistical side of things. So yes, it's our responsibility, our duty to ensure that on a consistent basis, we're explaining why we're doing these things.
Hmm. I have loved this conversation,
Ah,
John.
so bad.
Really,
Thank you.
really interesting. I'll woman up and say sometimes when I know a bean counter, which is a totally dreadful thing to say, but
That's right.
somebody with that background is coming on. A lot of times I'll be like, oh man, this is going to be a tough show because they're
Hmm.
not going to be, they're going to be
Yeah,
talking, like you said,
yeah,
rows and columns. I
yeah.
loved that. And I love how you have helped us understand that there's a different nuance here that we have got to understand and communicate and
Mm,
engage with, because ultimately that's what's going to make us super successful. And
indeed.
so, yeah, not the direction I thought this conversation would go. Super cool. I'm
Just,
like, you've like totally got me going for the week
oh,
here.
good, good. Oh, that was my
John,
pleasure.
Oh, a lot of fun. John Abrahamson, he is the CFO and COO of Action Council. You can go to actioncouncil.org and learn about their work. And I think you'll be able to see some of John's philosophies and approaches sprinkled in throughout the organization. It's really a great way to think about how you can structure your nonprofit, no matter the size.
Hmm.
I find that's what's so interesting, John, is that this has a much broader scope than just, a multi-million-dollar organization. We get to have these amazing conversations like we've had today with John, because we have presenting sponsors, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, JMT Consulting, and Intuit QuickBooks. John, as we leave each and every episode, we leave with this mantra, and it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well.